The following video will contain spoilers. You have been warned. All alterations to the manga panels and images have been made in order to prevent copyright. So yeah, let's get started. What is up guys, Beto here, coming at you guys with another Attack on Titan theory. This one is pertaining to the savage beasts of the island of Paradise. You know them, you love them, the Ackerman duo, Levi and Mikasa. Now, the question we're trying to answer today is whether or not Levi and Mikasa can actually transform into Titans, and then be able to go on and become Titan shifters if they eat one. You know, basic stuff. Now, as many of you keep reminding me, people from minority bloodlines cannot turn into Titans. Now, okay, I'll agree to this. Pure-blooded people who come from minority bloodlines cannot turn into Titans, and are also unaffected by the king's influence that wipes people's memories, as Kenny Ackerman's grandfather stated in chapter 64. However, notice how I said pure-blooded people. What if I told you that Levi and Mikasa are not pure bloods, and actually have some Eldian blood within them? So, before we dive into the origins of these two beasts, let me establish this. I'm going to use Reiner Braun as a precedent for what I'm going to discuss, because as of the newest Attack on Titan manga chapter, chapter 94, we discovered that Reiner is not a full-blooded Eldian like we had assumed. Turns out he was only Eldian from his mother's side. His father is an unnamed Marleyan soldier, making him half Marleyan, aka half non-Eldian. So this ended up establishing that you don't have to be a pure Eldian to transform into a Titan. You can get by being at least half Eldian from what we've seen this far. I will also be using someone else later in the video. Now, another thing I want to get out of the way is this. People from minority bloodlines are just non-Eldians, okay guys? The only reason they were called minority bloodlines in the first place was because Kenny Ackerman's grandfather and Rod Reese thought that all human life outside the walls was gone, and that the only remnants of humanity were inside the walls. So of course they were going to say that the few people who came from an obviously different bloodline are a minority, when compared to the majority of people who lived inside the walls that seemed to not have that special blood within them. The majority inside the walls, we have come to know them as the Eldian race. So I'm just going to repeat this again. The noble families, the minority bloodlines, the Ackerman and the Asian clans are basically just non-Eldians like the rest of the world outside the walls. The exception being the Eldians living within the Marley Empire inside the Liberio, however you guys want to say it, district. And now, finally we can begin. Let's first take a look at Levi and his ancestry. As we know from chapter 69, just to let you guys know I did not plan this, Levi is an Ackerman due to his mother, named Kuchel Ackerman. And that, I mean this in the nicest way possible, she was a hoe faux show. We already know she loved Levi, and she was only doing what she thought was necessary. Now what does Levi's mother being a hoe faux show have to do with anything, you may ask? Well guys, as we already know, Levi's father is unknown, because he was just one of Levi's mother's clients at the brothel she worked at. And when you use the logic of probability supported by the fact that there were already few people who possessed blood from the minority bloodlines within the walls, especially because they were still being persecuted at the time, it stands to reason that it was just unrealistic to assume that the one guy who planted his majestic seed that traveled and did what countless other seeds set out to do, which was to reach its goal of fertilizing Kuchel's egg in order to bring into existence the man who will then go on to be dubbed humanity's strongest, was an Asian. Like, seriously, that would be too coincidental. We already have Mikasa that came from apparently the only two clans that opposed King Fritz. So now that we have Levi being at least half Eldian established, we now must determine what being half Eldian would mean for Levi. And for this part, we're going to use my girl Historia for reference. Because I don't know if you guys remember, but minority bloodlines are not the only people who are supposed to be immune from the king's influence. Specific noble families and the Fritz family are supposed to be immune as well. But wait a minute there's a problem right here. As I said, the Fritz family has immunity to the king's memory wipe. But if that's true, how come Historia Reese just being the Fritz family name changed, why was she affected when her sister Frida used the Founding Titan's memory wipe on her, to make her forget she had even existed? She should have been unaffected, right? Well guys, do you also remember Historia is not a pure blood? Her mother, Alma, say it with me now, was a hoe faux show. Now, Historia's mother gets no sympathy from me. She was complete trash. And another thing she is an Eldian most likely, which makes Historia half ordinary Eldian. Now, if we take into account that just being half ordinary Eldian is enough to dilute your special blood and strip away your immunity from the king's influence, then I say Levi Ackerman does not have any immunity to the king's influence and would have his memory wiped like the other Eldians. And as for determining if he can transform, I would say yes, because we already have the evidence we need from Reiner being able to, while only being half Eldian. For if the time ever came where Levi would get injected with the Titan serum, that the Eldian blood coursing through his veins would react and trigger the Titan transformation, giving us, and I'm just speaking hypothetically here, an overpowered ass Titan. Like, come on, Levi is already the wish fulfillment character of the show. As a Titan, I don't give a fuck what Titan he would hypothetically get. He would dominate with any Titan. It wouldn't even matter, honestly. He would be massacring all of his enemies in the blink of an eye with even the fucking Cartman Titan's power. Trust. And now with Levi out of the way, we have Mikasa. So first off, let's quickly establish that Mikasa is at least half Asian. So in other words, half non-Eldian. From just her mother's side. Because it was kinda implied in chapter 6, or episode 6 of the anime, that Mikasa's mother was probably a pure-blooded Asian, like one of the last, if not the last, pure-blooded Asian within the walls. The Asian clan must have taken some Hyuga clan notes, I tell you, to keep themselves and their blood so pure. Now, when we take Mikasa Ackerman's lineage from her father's side into account, then that's when things start to get a bit more complicated. Because as you all well know by now, the 3 walls that protected the Eldians from the Titans were set up over 100 years ago. 100 years ago, King Fritz somehow migrated most of the Eldians, a few loyal noble families, the Ackermans, the Asian clan, and probably a few other families from minority bloodlines, to the island of Paradis. So that would mean that the Ackerman family would by now have at least gone through 3 to 4, maybe even 5 generations of children to have survived up to this point. Because if we assume that Rod Reese told us about the creation of the walls, that it was exactly 100 years ago, we have to minus 15 years because Mikasa was 15 at the time of chapter 64, so we get 85 years that we have to account for. Next, let's assume that Ackermans had children on average when they are about 25 years old, which would give us 3.4 generations, and if we round up, we get 4 generations. And I was being generous with 25 years old. I could have easily said 20 years instead because, look, we have a prime example right here of the kind of parents that are around in the world of Attack on Titan. Grisha Yeager was 20 years old when he and Dina Fritz had Zeke, so it's not unrealistic to assume that most people who do end up having kids become parents at a young age, like 20. Now, back to what I was saying, we have 4 generations of children that grew up inside the walls. So unless the Ackermans are keeping it in the family Pornhub style, I don't see how they would manage to preserve their bloodline and not have it become diluted with Eldian blood during the years they had lived within the walls. But whatever, let's give them some leeway and say they implemented some good old-fashioned House Targaryen tactics up in here, at least until Mikasa's grandfather's generation. Because in all honesty, for all we know, Mikasa's grandfather from her father's side could have seen Mikasa's future grandmother, which was some prime Eldian booty, and you know it, and felt the legendary Ackerman jolt for witnessing that booty firsthand, which resulted in the birth of Mikasa's father. And now Mikasa's father, being the byproduct of that wild lovemaking sesh, would therefore be at least half Eldian, consequently making Mikasa therefore at least 75% non-Eldian and 25% Eldian. And I don't know about you guys, but I have a feeling that this might leave Mikasa in the sweet spot regarding her blood, because maybe even being a quarter Eldian is enough to invoke the Titan transformation within her, but also having 3/4 non-Eldian blood is enough to retain the immunization of the king's influence, so she can therefore enjoy the best of both worlds. Hell, this might even play up into a potential ending to Attack on Titan, where Eren is about to sacrifice himself to save his allies, save his side of humanity, and before he dies, he decides to use the Founding Titan's memory wipe ability to have all of his friends and allies forget he ever existed, but Mikasa, being the only one of Eren's companions to be immune to the power, retains her memories of Eren, and in the end, she cries for Eren, the man who saved them, and that nobody seems to remember, which would be a very bittersweet ending to the series, in all honesty. So in conclusion, Levi is bare minimum at least half Eldian, maybe even more. He can transform into a Titan if injected with a Titan serum, but does not have immunity to the original Titan's memory wipe. Mikasa is bare minimum at least a quarter Eldian, might be more, and can probably transform into a Titan if injected with the Titan serum, and likely possesses the immunity to the coordinate Titan's memory wipe. And there you guys have it, my Attack on Titan theory regarding whether or not Levi and Mikasa can become Titans. I hope you enjoyed it. Comment down below what you guys think of my theory. Do you agree or disagree with me? What are some Attack on Titan theories you guys have? I would love to hear about them. And a little bonus theory for you guys. Remember how there are abnormal Titans around? Well, it seems like in the news chapter 94, the mystery has just been uncovered. At least for me. I personally think the Marley Empire just turns all those Eldian soldiers that have PTSD into Titans, because to them they think they're worthless, which in turn creates the abnormals in the first place. Just a quick food for thought for you guys. So yeah guys, rate the video, share it around, feel free to subscribe to this channel if you guys are new. I would really appreciate it, and as always people, stay gold!